I'm Richard Owen, and I'm a Professor of Responsible Innovation at the University of Exeter Business School in the UK. An interesting journey. I began as an environmental scientist looking at concepts of hazard and risk, and then I moved into regulation and I worked for a regulator, environmental regulator, for a while, and then I realised, being asked to think about how we manage the responsible emergence of new technologies, that actually regulation was quite poorly equipped to deal with things it had never encountered before. So new areas of science and technology that were at the margins of regulation. And so I thought, well, there needs to be another way. So I left working for the regulator. I learned an awful lot about regulation there, but I left working for the regulator to think about what that other way was, and that was probably 4 years ago. And since then I've been developing a program on responsible innovation to try to think about that and how that translates from concepts into practice. So our evolving definition of responsible innovation is quite broad, but it's intentionally so. So it's a commitment of care for the future through collective stewardship of science and innovation in the present. How that translates into practice, we've developed 4 dimensions of responsible innovation that support that collective duty of care for the future. And they aren't particularly new if you look back through decades of research. Individually, there's a lot of research within each. And so those dimensions are being anticipatory, trying to understand, describe, and analyse what kind of plausible futures there may be, what kinds of pathways to what kinds of impacts might happen. That's around anticipation. And there's a lot of methodologies of foresight and technology assessment that can help you with that. So anticipation is the first kind of supporting method or dimension. The second one is reflexivity. We need to be able to ethically reflect on those plausible futures and the dilemmas and uncertainties and assumptions and questions that will inevitably arise from those. And so being reflexive about that is very, very important. But it's important that we're not just individually reflexive, that we open that up to wider deliberation. So deliberation is the third dimension of responsibility. It's opening those questions and dilemmas and uncertainties up to broader discussion and debate and dialogue, to understand alternative ways of framing the pathways that science and innovation might bring. And the fourth and final dimension is a critical one, because it's okay for us to develop what we call reflexive capital. In other words, to understand about, through processes of anticipation and deliberation, about what sorts of futures might result from science and technology. But we need to be able to couple that to decisions about what we're going to do. So the fourth and final dimension is what we call responsiveness, which is around governance, but it also links back to processes of opening up. In other words, it's taking that broad reflexive capital and saying, okay, we're going to make a decision about the trajectory and pace of the science innovation itself. We've done a couple of experiments where we've worked with the research councils to try to take that broad definition that I've described of a commitment of care for the future through collective stewardship of science in the present into a real life situation. And we did it in a project that involved climate engineering, which is the intentional engineering of the Earth's climate, and a project called the SPICE project, which stood for Stratospheric Particle Injection for Climate Engineering. And the idea is that you're going to put up particles up into the stratosphere with the intention of lowering mean Earth temperature. And that's a very controversial area of science, fraught with uncertainty and ignorance. So it's a very good test bed of that. And what we did is we translated those dimensions that I mentioned of responsible innovation into questions about that we asked the scientists to respond to. Questions about safety and risk, yeah, but also questions about what kind of impacts might happen in the future, what uncertainties are there with them, and have they discussed those uncertainties more broadly and deliberated about those with various stakeholders in the publics. And the challenges that raises are considerable, but so are the opportunities. So if you're going to ask people to work in that way, you have to support and resource them to undertake the really necessary multidisciplinary work that's there. You can't ask a volcanologist or an engineer to be able to understand those kinds of methodologies that allow you to reflect and anticipate, deliberate, and then act. That's critically important. The other thing is that it possibly will require quite fundamental changes to the way we fund, commission and deliver science and technology. If you're going to have multidisciplinary programs that allow those dimensions to be enacted, you're going to have to set that up from the beginning, right from the beginning, right from when you're conceiving programs of research all the way through their delivery. And that's a culture change for not only the scientists, but those that fund them as well. But it's a culture change that they are willing to embrace. When I've talked to scientists and talked to funders, they say, yeah, we get the idea that we need to innovate responsibly. We just need to know how to do that, and we need to be supported in that way.